Makosi, thank you so much for inviting us. I will start just by, introducing myself as the chairperson of the Interim Traditional Health Practitioners Council of South Africa. The council, as we know, was appointed by the minister in April 2023. So it's been a year and a couple of months. This is not the first time. We were actually, I think this is probably the third council that is being appointed through the Interim Traditional Health Practitioners Act number 22 of 2007. The department has been trying to make sure that there is a functional council that can facilitate the registration of traditional health practitioners in the country. And without a council, we are not able to do that. So I'm leading a council, which is the third attempt under Minister Joe Pasha last year. So the council itself is established by the Act, Section 7. So when we talk about members of council, we talk about Section 7 members. The chairperson herself is appointed by the minister, but then the vice chairperson is appointed by the council itself. What happens is that the minister sends out a call through a gazette to the public to say, can you please submit names of people that you think can serve in council. Traditional healers submitted CVs, nominations. You don't appoint yourself, you get nominated by the community. So our organizations and the healer community, Nezimpande Zetu, then submitted those names. So I also was one of the names that were submitted. And there's a committee then within the Department of Health that sits and look at these CVs and recommend to the minister on the basis of qualification, on the basis of experience, on the basis of exposure and knowing the sector. So they look at different things. And that is how we were appointed. So the chairperson is appointed then by the council. There's 22 names that constitute council, which is the chairperson, and then there's a vice chairperson under Section B of Section 7, subsection B. And then Gube 9 members, each of them coming from different provinces. They represent the provinces, and they also have to be traditional healers. And those also are established in terms of Section 9, Section 7, subsection C. And then there are different representatives from different other councils, because the idea is that all councils, you call them statutory bodies within the Department of Health, they are managed by a public entity directorate of all councils, the dental councils, the medicines councils, the allied councils, the pharmacists, and so on. All of us that are doing the work of health in the country. So we get one representative from the Department of Health that sits in the council so that there is a liaison between ourselves and the department. You also get a lawyer, someone that is vested in law, because we deal with legal issues in terms of registration, in terms of offenses, in terms of also protection for the public, the user as well. We've got a medical practitioner as well. We've got a pharmacist. We've got 3 representatives from the community. These are just people who bring in a sense of the community of healers. What is going on the ground? What are the issues? That's how council gets to know. And then we've got one representative from the different categories that are established by the Act. So the Act establishes different categories of healers, which is a diviner, a herbalist, a traditional surgeon, and a traditional birth attendant. So you get each of them then that constitute the 22. So that is how we came into being Makos. We were nominated by a community of healers, and then we were appointed in those ways. And the idea then of this council is to do many things, but the first thing is to make sure that we are registered Makos as healers. We are in the system of public health. Whether we operate public health or as private health, but at least we have some kind of recognition to say you have a practice number, or you have some kind of recognition to say you can register, which is then part of the sort of the priorities the council, I would say, at this point that we are nominated, the one that is here now, just to really fast track the process of registration. And then we can do other things, because for as long as we are not in the system, there are many things that are not able to happen, Even if we are producing Makambi aid to Esintu, we are producing our medicines, we've got our own schools, in terms of Iluntuzana, Amaphehlo wetu. Those are not recognized. Some of us who issue certification, our curriculum, indigenous curriculum that we teach Emaphehlweni is not recognized by the system of education in the country. But as soon as we get registered, it is then possible to have the linkages with the systems in the country to say, we know that Ugogo Usmenjalo is a school of initiation, and this is the curriculum that she uses to teach Amatwasan, and then this is the practice number, because when you talk about the institution in terms of Ubulapi Bendabugo, you're not necessarily talking about a school like a university. Ukobela is an institution because it's an institution in Ndabugo. It's an indigenous institution that we call a school. It's like an elder in our indigenous system. Is a library. So the process seeks to recognize that. It seeks a language that would say, this is how we do traditional health. And I think the mandate of this council then is to assist the department to frame that language, to bring in the healers into the conversation, to say, how do we best document the process of regulation in the manner that embraces who we are as Abalapi Bendabuko.
Which has been the biggest challenge, I suppose. Yes. Okay, we're speaking about registration and the schools, and we want to also put in the fact that without registration, registration, yes, puts us in a system, it also makes us a professional organization or a professional body, and it also looks at a set of standards, ways in which we can say, we're speaking syllabus, for instance. Yes, you say that a healer or Okobela is an institution because of the nature of the work that we do. But we do need to have some kind of standards so that we know that, and we're aligned, that at least this person that is registered as a traditional health practitioner has this level of training, they've gotten this level of training. And we can also have a body that can vouch, if we are registered, then we can vouch that yes, you were vetted, you qualified. There's the criteria that is set. You were able to qualify to be a traditional health practitioner. So that is why you are registered.
That's right.
The standards I find are going to set us up as a professional body, which is actually what is needed. But of course, personally, I appreciate the registration.
Togos, Makos, yeah. No, it's true, Makosi. The Act itself has got Section 47, which I can point all of us as healers to read. That is the section that then permits for regulation. And there are many regulations that you can put in place. But this one of registration is really just the first one. In fact, it's the second one, because the first regulation that came out was the one that appoints council. Because a minister can't appoint council unless it is gazetted. So the first gazette that went out, that's how the legislation and policy process works, was to put us in place. The Act itself, since 2003, in fact, is never going to be functional unless there's a regulation. So when you do a process of law, you have an Act, but you always need a regulation to implement the different aspects of the Act. And that is why this is just not the only regulation. There's going to be many others. We are probably going to see a regulation around training, education and training, probably going to see a regulation around traditional medicines. We are going to see a regulation around commercialization of our medicines. You may see a regulation around prescriptions. We may see regulation around issuing of medical notes. So whatever the Act provides in terms of Section 47, we are able to regulate for. So this is the second type of a regulation that we've had, which is to ensure that healers get into a register. We want to sort that first. And of course, the main purpose is to do exactly what you're saying, Gogo, to set up minimum standards. Mm-hmm. So the regulation that came out, talks about a number of things. A couple of things which I can highlight, Makosi. It talks about the minimum standard of qualification, which is ABET level 1. This process does not mean that the department is imposing on us. A regulation basically is a process of consultation that is provided in any act, including the act that governs Traditional Health Practitioners Council, practitioners. So it's a call to say, please have your say. It's a call to all of us as healers, Bendabugo, to say, you can write this the way you want it to be. This is just a proposal from where we are sitting, because we are operating within an environment maybe where we can learn from how the nurses have done it, from how the medical doctors have done it, from how social workers have done it. But you are a unique people. We can only offer a draft. But in 3 months' time, you have an opportunity to write it the way you want, give input. And that input is going to be taken into consideration before a final draft then is given back to the minister to say, this is what the healers are saying. Our role then is to make sure that we rewrite with the input from healers a version that we can say, we have spoken to traditional healers. This is what they are saying from the draft. This is what we've got. And this is what the healers of South Africa want. You can then promulgate this as a process of registration. Makos. That's what this consultation is about.
Makos. For the next 3 months. So people wanting to, we have a window. A
window of opportunity. The law provides 3 months of consultation. So these regulations came out on the 21st of June. Mm-hmm. They will be on the public domain until the 20th of September. So in that period, individual healers, organizations, schools, media houses, users of traditional medicine, you don't even need to be a healer to make a submission. If you are surviving for your own health on African traditional medicines, you have a right to give input, because your healer is going to prescribe medicines for you. Your healer is going to prescribe remedies for you. So you need to know how your healer is accredited. Makos. So it's even the community. Everyone can make input into this process.
Because the act itself also is to protect the public.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about the health practitioners themselves. It's also to protect the public who actually use our services.
That's right.
So that is why it is really critical for them to also comment and submit their opinions and views on the service that they actually use.
Togoza cool.
So within the council itself, there are still subcommittees.
Yes. So the council functions through the 22 council that I've spoken about. And then you have an executive committee out of that, which becomes the leadership sort of council in between the meetings of council. And then you have committees. So for instance, we've got a committee that is looking on issues of education and accreditation. We've got a committee that is looking at legal issues and disciplinary issues of compliance, whether people are dying, whether people are being murdered, whether there's rape, and so on, looking at offenses that are happening within the practice. We also have a committee that is looking at communications, just to make sure that we are communicating with the stakeholder. We are aware, Makosi, that traditional healers have been waiting for 1.5 years to hear from us as the council to say what is happening. So we have established a committee that will assist us to be able to communicate with the Iznyanga so that people know what we are doing. It has taken long, and I will explain what we have been doing, to get here. So and then we also can establish other committees. The Act gives us an option to say if we want to establish a committee of experts, for instance, in the sector, those things can happen. A disciplinary committee just to manage offences, because council is a regulator. Anyone can submit a complaint to council to say, I'm not happy with this and that, makosa makulu. So we as and when there's a need to establish a committee, we can. We've got a finance and audit committee that looks at our funding, our incomes, and our compliance with the Public Finance Management Act. Healers need to be aware that this council is very unique because currently it's funded by the National Treasury. So we are not like other councils that are raising money for themselves, mainly because we are at the moment not able to generate revenue. Other councils are registering their members and they're obviously getting revenue from that. So we were, probably, heard our cry in that the Minister of Finance and Government decided to say, we are going to give this council a seed assistance through the taxpayers' money. So the budget that we are using now comes from Treasury to say, start yourself up, organize yourselves up. It's not a long-term arrangement. It's a special arrangement because of the kinds of issues we deal with compared to other councils.
And it's also an establishment stage.
It's an establishment stage, yeah. And government is saying we are aware of the problems now since 2003. So this council needs a particular level of support. So this council, because it requires a particular level of support, which government said we are going to offer. So what that means then is that it's not a permanent arrangement. They are saying you have to find your independence at some point. Once you register, that's the beginning of your independence. We don't have to hold on to you. You can do as you wish, as is Nyanga. Organize yourselves as you wish. With your own revenue, you can raise your own funding, which is the responsibility of this council. Until such time, obviously, government has realized that it's difficult for this council to gain revenue, mainly because the kind of spirituality that we are working with is not even attractive to donors. Donors don't want to fund Iznyanga because a lot of misinformation, a lot of myths about who we are,
it's also ungovernable, which makes sense.
Exactly.
If I'm going to say my ancestor, which is my dead great whatever, it's ungovernable.
Totally.
Who can govern spirit? So it's actually, you guys have a mammoth task ahead of just trying to organize us. Because just the space on its own, and the spiritual space, because yes, we are calling it Traditional Health Practitioners Act, but there's a spiritual
it's actually spirit.
Yes, that we cannot run away from.
Exactly. So there's a recognition of that. How do you govern spirit? How do you sell the work of spirit to a donor? So those have been the challenges to say, government is saying we are aware of that, so we just want to give it into your hands so that you are able to then define it the way that you would like to define it. There are some components that would need to be regulated, like your education and training, curriculum are things that are easy to regulate. You just need to put the curriculum in place, perhaps try and standardize it, because uktwasa, in all the Nguni traditions, there are so many similarities, Makos. Maswati, they have similarities with Amazulu have similarities with Maxhosa, we are all Ngunis, Singabangoni. So there's that recognition. But then the spiritual component, I think, becomes what they call a divana in the act. But it's got a lot of complexities. And for that reason, it's not been able to attract funding. People shy away from it. But that is where our government said, okay, let us just put the seed funding. I just wanted to highlight that part.
The seed funding.
The seed funding. So this process of regulation is very imperative, Makosi, for that reason, that honestly speaking, whatever becomes a regulation process is in our own hands. In these 3 months, we have to define that process. in these 3 months, we have to actually say. But what has happened in the past is that as healers, as soon as we see the regulations, I think we stay at the place that says, why is government telling us what to do? And I think it's a question perhaps sometimes of not understanding the process of legislation and how it happens. To a certain extent, also the manner of communication that has been coming from the side of the department to healers, because I think the department is challenged to work with Izimpande, for example, and has then put its own mechanisms to say, okay, we're going to put maybe ATM structures on the ground. We will try and work with organized organizations, because to go and work with Amajoye, Bondabezita, is quite complex. To go and work with Umnikazi Wempande, Eswatini, Komhlabeyalingana, has been complex for the department because they don't understand those things.
On spiritual matters, that's the thing. It's also the parity between you're speaking health, you're speaking standards, you're speaking
spirit. Yes. So those have been the complexities, which is why I think when you read the Act, Section 7, it is very, very deliberate to say a chairperson has got to be a traditional healer, because it is understood that only a person that has a lived experience and reality of the relationship of spirit and the modalities of being a spirit being living in a human experience that requires these experiences would be able to assist and drive the council towards a place that says there are these complexities. So as we talk regulation in this human world, let us also realize that there are certain spiritual components, because we are spirit, that we would need to take care of. And the realization is that you do need to have traditional healers to drive that process. So the plea, Makosi, from where I am sitting, is that let us embrace this process. Let us take charge as Abelaphi Bendabugo and define this process for ourselves. I think it's a moment that is provided to us, from the place of spirit.
That's not being forced into anything.
No.
We are actually being invited to participate.
We are being invited.
In building a body that is going to regulate us, that is going to protect us. Because if we're regulated, it also protects us.
Makos.
It is going to protect our communities.
Towards them called.
Makos.
So that traditional healing does not disappear. Because if it doesn't get regulated, slowly it's going to disappear, because something else is going to replace it.
What we are saying, we don't have a name of what is actually happening, but yes, we are all seeing it, and that is why we have an appreciation actually of the regulation. I think traditional health practitioners should actually be rejoicing at this point that there will be some kind of control.
Both, I suppose, rejoicing, but also skeptical.
The skepticism has been big. That's what has delayed the work.
Cool. I think we stayed only on skepticism, but we did not come to the other side. So we are being called into balance to say we can't not necessarily not be skeptical, because we are living in a world that is that has been affected by systems of oppression, Makosi, of colonization. In our context as South Africa, apartheid is not gone in our psyche. And I think we need to stay in our reality. So we need to stay vigilant. We have to stay vigilant. So we can't blame healers necessarily for being skeptical. But we are also saying, in our being skeptical, let us discern the moment, because we are people of spirit. Let us not stay in that skepticism. Let us invite spirit and transcend into a place that says, what time is it? And my reading of the situation, Makosi, is that spirit is calling on us to say, take charge. This is a new era. We've seen it beyond COVID-19. Something has changed in the world. We are being called into decolonizing ourselves. And the skepticism has been, of course, that we don't want to be dragged into some Western ways of doing things, for lack of a better word. I think healers are skeptical about that. It's a genuine skepticism. But let us not stay there. Let us rise then and say, this is how we are going to return to ourselves. If anything else was taken away, from us by colonization, we're still here. The fact that we're still here, Siyatwasa, Makosi, we call on ancestors and ancestresses. We still have a relationship with spirit. It means that we are the descendants of the work of spirit that was never destroyed. We are here. We have not disappeared. We just need to define for South Africa who we are through these regulations. And what does it mean to regulate iphehlo? Because iphehlo is not the same as a degree, Makos. But we do have a language. And I think we have taken so long to give that language to the Ministry of Health to say, this is the language of who we are. And it's oral, it's in different places, it's in stones, it's in rocks, it's in art, it's in nature. But we have evolved also because many of us, as much as we contest the system of westernization, we have also risen to it to say we are going to do these degrees. We are going to learn to read and write so that we can write our own story, So we can find a balance between those two and say, I understand how Ukoko Solomon speaks to me, and I need to then translate that to the world in ways that makes meaning to this world, because I'm a spirit being, but I live in a human experience, and find the balance that says, how do I enable my human self to communicate the things that do not make sense to a naked eye, that I see every day in my dreams, that I see in my visions, that I hear in my head and in my heart, these voices, how do I then translate them to the language of public health? Because it is public health. That's how we heal ourselves. And this is the moment. And my sense, Makos, is that there's many of us that have packaged this language in different ways. Now we even have technology. We're living in the fourth industrial revolution. There's YouTubes, there's TikToks, there's a lot of knowledge that was hidden because of oral communication that now we are able to translate into virtual spaces. Some of us are already starting to put it into books. And that's the way to go. And we can then put that into a regulation. My take is, Bandabadala, we can write our own resolution. There is no reason why. We have 3 months to do it. Let us do it.
Makos.
Makos.
And we also should actually have the appreciation that the world is moving forward, life is moving forward, and we are in the world. And we are, even though we are of spirit, we also have to participate in this experience. And we are where we are, we cannot go back. I think that's the most important thing for me, is that we can't go back. We cannot sit back and ignore the progression and say we're not going to be a part of it because it doesn't agree, or there's something about it that makes me uncomfortable, when we actually have to live in the reality. And the reality of it is that this is where we are. This is a profession. This craft is a profession. And a lot of people are living off it. People are being healed by it. And people are being harmed by it as well. So it does need regulation. So we need to participate. We need to be, because we are where we are and we have been invited to participate, it's not going to be forced down our throats. Because if we do not participate, then that's not how we're going to feel about it. And we're going to reject it when it is something that is supposed to actually make our work easier as well. So that I find should be one of the, should be our attitude. And a big thing also that I found in my consultations and just speaking with other healers in the commentary is that people have not, the traditional health practitioners have not actually engaged with the act. They have not actually read it.
Yes.
And if you have not read it, then you're going to not be able to engage it because you don't know what is in it. So you're going to be fighting it from a point of
not knowing.
Yeah. So it's not only just a matter of communication, because or from the interim council only, But it is also, we should make the effort to find the information, because the information is in the public domain, as you say. And we are going to have more critique and we are going to be more critical if we do not, if we are relying on somebody else to actually get the bits and pieces of information that is being disseminated.
And it's very important what you are saying. One of the things in these regulations, if you look at, for instance, it provides different things, but there's a very important section that I want to bring to healers. Section 10. Section 10 in the regulations, Makosi, speaks about exemption from requirements at this beginning phase of registration. And I think healers are worried about that. To say now they want me to do ABET level 1, now they want me to have a certificate and so on. Section 10 recognizes the fact that there are people who are initiated already for many, many years, who are elders, who are teachers, who are trainers, abokobela, all koko no kokogazi. We can't expect through the system to say now, ugogo or umazulu kwamhlabuya lingana now needs to produce an ABET level 1. It's impossible, Makos. And there are many other things, We know that 20 years ago, we never really had certificates being issued. And there still is Mbande that don't issue certificates to say we recognize you now, utwasile. Go and put this in Dumbenyako, or in your shrine. So Section 10 says that as we enter the process of registration, those people abatwasile are exempted. And it's very important for us to understand that. It is only going to be the ones that are new in the system of healing, in the system of training, who will then be required to say, when you twasa now that if regulations get passed in the next 3 months and someone comes to April and December, then, the new requirements kicks in for those people. But anyone that has been a Kobela or a Sangoma or Inyanga or a herbalist or a traditional surgeon, before the promulgation of these resolutions, will automatically get into the system because of Section 10. And I think we are not aware of this, maybe for reasons that you've stated, Makos, that many of us, we probably are not taking time to read these regulations. And it's understandable, not all of us are able to read and write, which is why Council is saying, let us go to communities and have izimbizo, or what you call a roadshow. So we are planning a roadshow now as we speak, Makosi, to go into the communities in all provinces to take these regulations there to say, speak. You don't have to write it. We will listen to you, we will take your input, and we'll make sure that it's covered in here. And we have translated it in all the languages.
That's the next question. So it's out there.
It's out. Yes, it's all in all the languages. I'm aware that translation is going on now. I think the different languages will be coming out, as we speak, as they get completed. But by the time we hit the road, all the languages that are needed for all provinces will be there, at least the dominant languages. And wherever we will be, we speak the language of the community to make sure that we are as accessible as possible. MaskwaZulu Natali, sizoyikhuluma regulation ngesizulu. Translate the regulation ngesizulu. Maselimpopo retlabuka kaSetswana, reyenze regulation or eso kaSetswana. Into njalo. So that's how we are going, the approach we are using. And we'll be doing this for the next 3 months. But we are also saying, Makosi, the sector has changed. There are those of us who are beyond ABET level 1. Some of us are pharmacists already, we are doctors, but sitwasile. Some of us have got various other qualifications. We are lawyers. So we can read and write. And we are saying that those who can make submissions in writing, let them do that. We will also probably make an opportunity to say, even if you've made a submission in writing, but you still want to speak in your own voice, Council will create that opportunity to say, come and read it to us and present it to us. Because sometimes what you've written here becomes more clearer when you speak it in your own voice. So those are the processes that we are putting in place. I think the other point of contestation is the question of age, because there is in the regulation, there's a minimum age that is being proposed, that anyone that needs to be a Twasana must be above the age of 18. I know it's a bone of contention, that issue. But we are saying to healers, let us communicate that to the resolution. Why is it that as traditional healers, we may not be able to be limited by the age of 18? Because we get a calling when we are young. And if there's that contestation, let us write it up. Let us give language to the department to understand why we say those things. So these are not imposed. This is not cast in stone. Healers have an opportunity to propose. ABET level 1 is not necessarily a qualification. It's just basically saying you just need to be able to read and write. You don't even have to have gone to school. But ABET level 1 is that basic level of knowing, where you are just able to write a letter and to be able to read a particular document. So healers were also saying, what is ABET level 1? People were thinking that now I need to have a degree. No, ABET level 1 is it's like sub A, for those of us who've done or sub A. I don't know what it's called now, grade 1. Yes. So it's like grade 1 in the current curriculum course. So it's those things to say, we need to be able to read, like you were saying, Ndlondlo. Part of the contestation and maybe our rejection of the process has been that we just did not want to read it because we were antagonistic towards it. And
not only antagonistic, at this point we also want the council to actually recognize the fact that it has been in English. The communication has been in language that's in a foreign language. A language that is not indigenous to us, and that is what you guys are working on, which is beautiful. So I think that is a thing that we should actually press on and make people comfortable in the space that they actually will be. Not only will they be able to submit or make submissions, like you say, when you in KwaZulu-Natal, you are going to be speaking in Zulu, but it will also be available on paper for someone in KwaZulu-Natal who wants to see it in Sesotho. They'll be able to find it in that way. And that is also the importance of being able to read and write. I think that also comes in, and also in just being able to understand your own clients. And so there are reasons for all the set standards and criteria. There's reasons. I'm looking at specifically now, as we're speaking now, is the age limit that has been actually that is detailed here. Yes, it is going to be very interesting.
I think they probably, yes, and maybe the other one would be the duration of training, because Tina, we train umuntu yathwasa in 3 months' time. If idlozi lakho is fast.
But also, what is it? Because now that is where the language comes in.
That's right.
So you're divine.
Yes.
So in 3 months, that's where it comes in now, the language of spirit.
That's right.
There's desire diviner, diviner or by spirit. So you are able to then make it make sense if you understand what is actually going on. But also 3 months also, then if we're now speaking to a person that is going to be prescribing medication for people to ingest, that also now is tricky.
And then that is the worry. I think that has been the conversation to say, and you will see how they actually, the resolution breaks down the months to say, umuntu uyangena ephehlweni. As you come in, you are probably still dealing with divination issues, you are understanding spirit, and so on. You probably have not even started to interact with herbs. As you start growing edlozini, you then start being introduced to herbs, ukugaya, and the different types of herbs and their meaning. And some people leave iphehlo having not completed that part of the curriculum. And some of them then start learning it outside of iphehlo, maybe for another year, even 2 years and 3 years.
But so never do.
And others just don't do. Once you've left iphehlo, there are a number of healers who complaining to say, Mina ugobela wami did not teach me medicines. You know, we know that those things are out there. So the proposal is that do not leave Ipehlo without a full curriculum, at least the basic of the understanding of the work of spirit, which is called divination, the understanding of herbalism, which is your understanding of herbs and the treatments thereof, the understanding of prescriptions, Makos, you know, how do you prescribe to your patient, and then the understanding perhaps of the basic rights of patients and the rights of you as a healer, those kinds of things, which then is just they're saying it's a minimum of 12 months. I anticipate that it may be contested.
It may be contested, but if you are now in the way that you are framing it, you're learning to engage with spirit, you are learning to divine, engaging with spirit. Now you have just learning about herbs, the categories on its own could take 12 months. 12
hours.
So it will be contested.
It's different modules.
Yes, it's many modules. So it's this is, if you're looking, we do not want to compare it to a degree or to even a diploma, because it's two different things that we're speaking about. But the amount of knowledge and information that is actually in there cannot be gotten in 3 months. Really,
that's the bottom line.
It cannot be gotten also in 12 months.
12 hours.
So I think also, because there are categories. In the categories themselves, if you're just divining, the period
is probably shorter.
It's probably shorter, and that is why I'm 12 weeks to 6 months. But when I keep it low, that is all they are doing. Twasa, which is the spiritual covenant, and then you go back home and you're going to divine. The difference is that when people then get home, now you're divining. I've told you that the problem is, what then is the solution? Because then now the solution means that now I need to give you some herbs.
Yes.
So I have not learnt that.
Yeah.
And the spirit is going to teach me. The spirit is going to teach me. And that is exactly what we're trying with this. The government is trying to work at, to standardize and regulate. Because then I cannot give you medicine if I have not learned about it. Yes, and Madlos Wami, yes, they have taught me imiti as a shonjal. But how many medicines do we learn from Ihlozikoko? We also need to be honest in the way that, in our ways, for this act to be able to work for us, for the regulation to work for us, first and foremost, before we actually look at our clients and our patients.
And that's so true, Makosi. And we know the sector, we are in it. We know that these things are there, these things are happening. And I think the idea then is to try and say, let us self-correct as well. And this is, maybe let us all agree to say, it is not okay for someone to enter Ipehlo and just finish a divination. You know, especially if a person in a calling your bungoma. Let us include in our curriculum herbs. Let us include in our curriculum how to prescribe herbs, measurements, probably even the understanding of the human anatomy, you know, to understand the herbs that will heal the heart, the kidney, you know, the pancreas, you know, and you don't ordinarily get in our curriculum, for instance, the understanding of the human physiology.
Come to Afro Survey.
Makos.
It's part of our curriculum.
Very important, Makos.
Just the anatomy.
Yes.
Before we can actually even go into what then you're going to be putting into it.
Makos.
You need to have an understanding. Also of just the connection between spirit, the body, the psyche,
yes,
mind, body, and soul. What is that connection?
Yes.
Togoza,
Makosi. Yeah. So that's the curriculum, Makosi. So that's the idea. So that's the only proposal in Section 6 of the regulation, to say, let the curriculum at least be 12 months. And it's the same for the categories, for all categories, except for the traditional surgeons who are said to say, for you to be able to circumcise, what we're seeing, because we have a lot of challenges in the initiation schools. Children are dying. In the Eastern Cape, every year we've got deaths from initiation schools. So at least someone to know how to properly circumcise indigenously, because it's different than the way medical doctors are doing it. You need to at least have gone through the training for 2 years. Ipehlo lako is 2 years. And then you can start to be a traditional surgeon. For the birth attendants, for the diviners and the herbalists is 12 months. And it's different curriculum because a herbalist does not drink, for instance, ipuzikas lembuzi, like makos, you know. But the herbalist is probably given herbs through dreams and visions. But there is still some kind of holding a hand by a teacher or someone to say, okay, in your curriculum, these are the things that we need to see, that you understand how to identify herbs in the forest. You can smell them, you can taste them, and you can measure them. You understand how they work with different parts of the anatomy, you know, those kinds of things. And that should take a process of the year so that you don't rush it.
And also just to appreciate the fact that, yes, you are given them in your dreams and upiwe and bomkulu. But you still also, it's the range of herbs, so that also when you are in the forest and you are harvesting, if that we have challenges, there things that the council, I'm hoping, is going to actually look at the fact that we actually have no forests. We cannot harvest, we have no access. But in the case that you actually are in the forest, and yes, you have been shown this and this one, but you should be able to actually know that, okay, this I can actually also, this can be used for this.
Totally.
So the training affords you to gain information that is you're getting from the trainer and also from your ancestors. So not from just one avenue.
Yeah. And ancestors are recognized also as teachers of us, because we first and foremost learn from that dream before we have the human contact, which is that relationship between spirit and the human element. The other thing I want to touch on is the issue of fees. The regulation also talk about fees.
Of course.
I think probably that's going to be one of the only issues, but it is proposing, for instance, that as a student, for you to be able to register Mangene Petlweni, it's 200 rand for the first set of registration, and then every year you can pay 100 rand as a student.
For as long as you're still a student.
For as long as you're a student. Once you graduate, and then you become a traditional healer, your fee is that fee of 500 rand a year. But for oneself to get into the system, because it's a new registration process, the council is proposing 1,000 rand. But where I have been hearing challenges is for Bokobela and traditional schools, because that is 1,500 rand a year. But your entry fee is proposed to be 5,000 rand. I've been hearing that people, are raising issues around that. But healers are then being called to also say and suggest and make proposals in that regard. And
also look at, I would say, from where I was sitting and when I was looking at it, my considerations were about considering how many initiates this Kobela has in a year, for instance. That is a consideration. Looking also at where this Kobela is and also the charges. Because then there are many considerations. Yes, we cannot expect we cannot expect even council. We know that we cannot look at a Kobela that initiates 20 people in a year and a Kobela that initiates 3 people in a year and say, okay, about their entry level should be the same. Yes, we do maybe want to standardize it, but there are considerations like that.
Togos. Yes, and I think healers are welcome, to make those kinds of proposals to say, how would it be if you look at it in these ways? I'm sure council would be able to look into it as well.
This is what you are wanting.
That's what we are asking for. That's what we are saying. Let us inform council in terms of how the sector works. Ubunyanga nokuthwasisa nokuba ukobela is not the same as running a university, because universities have got a standard fee. But like you're saying, some of us get 20 students at the same time and others get only one in 10 years. Others just don't have a student to assist. So it's those kinds of things. But this process is then to say, let us all have a conversation and see what is the best system that we can put in place in terms of fees. The Act as it stands actually provides that council can then set up a proposal to say, once we all get registered, we need to sort of try and standardize our fees as well. So that when someone says, I'm going to a school of traditional healing, we know that Gobelas can negotiate a fee within a particular benchmark, so that you don't get Gobelas charging 120,000 for doctors and others charging 10,000 rand, for instance. So I think the next process is probably just to say that, and healers can also say, what is the best mechanism? What is the benchmark? Can we all agree and say, Uktwasisa will range between 10 and 50,000, and the Gobela can negotiate themselves, because as lingani, even in the type of work that we do, the type of conditions that we offer to Matwasana, those things count.
And also, then also looking at the training content will then make also a big difference.
Exactly.
In what it is, and how we are looking and being able to, when we're trying to consider that. Because if a Gobela will trust us for 10,000 rand, but if you have one that will trust us for 120,000 rand, and they are actually teaching, so the content,
the valuable content,
the content is actually really important. So that is why then we need those standards as well. We need the syllabus, maybe.
The syllabus.
For instance, at least this is what should be covered.
And
it should be covered in this manner. And when we look at that also, I look at assessments as well. Did okay, yes, I taught, but did they get it?
Exactly. Examination. So the regulation speaks to all of those things. How was the examination done? So when you go for registration as a student, once you graduate, you'll need to bring in a logbook that says, this is what I've learned, mina epehlweni lam, signed by your Gobela, to say this child, umntwana wami understands African cosmology. Umntwana wami ngimfundisile spiritual philosophy, and they understand herbs, and they understand divination, and so on and so on. Marcos.
It's actually good. It's interesting times.
I know,
especially for you guys. But it's interesting times for us as well. Yeah. I'm excited. I want to be able to, because there's so much information that we need to share with these children.
Yes.
And with our children when they come through, there's so much information. And having others, godlos and other traditional healers working at putting together information that we need to share is an opportunity that we should actually be embracing. Not only for ourselves, because this is how we also learn, but also for the fact that we will know that when a child leaves here, they are well equipped. And you will know that the future of we are going to be the ancestors at that point. That the future of this craft is actually in good hands, and that is really what I want for not just us, but for our ancestors.
Yes. And that's all that's what the process is about, really. I imagine it in this way, that what we should be doing in these 3 months, we should be we should be having these conversations, go back to Bandigas Bempande and say, hey, can we talk? Have you seen this regulation? Those are the conversations you should be having in Bandenzetu, and then we say, let us put something here. What do you think? Even if you record it, put it in a video and say, I don't have time to write, or I just can't write it, but this is what we could produce. Or when as a Gobela nabantwana bakho, you could do a thing like that as well, to say, Tina, this is our thing. Those are the things that should be happening, so that it doesn't just come from organizations and NGOs and big associations, because the nitty-gritty ila empandeni mkhulu, the nitty-gritty ila empandeni endlondlo. Yabona into ngisho makhosa makhulu.
We also note that we have many, or should I say we have sacred information.
Yes.
And that is where also the challenge comes in, I suppose. But we also note that, and understand that there's sacred information that is what actually speaks to the bande, and the difference band between the bandes themselves, that they hold a specific set of information, sacred information, that others may not have access to. So we actually understand that, and it should be, I don't know how that is going to be factored into the considerations as we go ahead.
I think my sense is that it can be given language to say, even though singabangoni sonke, impande yakwaSoshangane angeke ifane nempande yakamSwati. Impande, like we can give that without necessarily saying what happens mangabe uyothwasela impande yakho, for instance, because it's different to twasa for being isangoma, but ukuthatha impande is a different process of initiation. You don't necessarily have to divulge those details, but to explain the process, to say there are certain things, even the customary act, the Customary Initiation Act, for example, recognizes the fact that birth attendants, ababelethisi, are not able to divulge how they actually do the process of birthing, because that process in itself is very sacred. How you engage with the umbilical cord and you engage with the placenta yomntwana, and the rituals that go with that are actually very special to every particular clan and every particular tribe, nempande. So those things you don't necessarily divulge. But I think what we can then write into a document is exactly that, Makos. Is exactly that aspect of sacredness, to say, what is the meaning of sacredness and the meaning of spirit, and how far can a process of regulation go and not go, so that we then say in a paragraph or in a sentence, I'm making an example, we can't regulate. I think let's say indigenous communities have a right to protect their sacred components of the healing practice. I'm just making an example. Does that make sense? Yes. So we need to just put it in there as because that's our language. But I don't think that the National Department of Health will have that language. We know it. We always say there are certain things that are sacred that we can't say. Let's put it in there. It's one sentence.
And it is the one. It is why I brought it up is because we're speaking about how we are trying in the efforts to put things in writing for us, and also looking at addressing the differences in the ways in which we share information, or in which we teach, and what it is that brings a child's ancestors to a particular sangoma or a particular sigodlo, or for training, or the particular mpande. So we do have the appreciation as you guys, as healers, as also the government. Like you say, it really is up to us. But how we actually order it, if we are not participating in the process, then it cannot be accounted for.
And I think we do have points of reference in law that can assist us. If you look at the way in which traditional leadership is regulated, there is a deep sense of respect. Let's make an example. When we looked at the burial of Umntwana kaPhindangene, I'm just pointing to that scenario. There was a deep sense of appreciation in terms of the customary laws of the country, the laws that govern kingdoms and queendoms and royalties, that even though the funeral was televised, when it came to certain moments where rituals had to be performed at the grave, everybody was told, we are not going to put this one on the media, because in terms of our practice, indigenous practices, these things we can't show to the public.
This is sacred.
This is sacred. And we can also do that as Izangom. We should be doing that. And it's written up in law. So the traditional legislation in the country and policies and regulations respect that element of sacredness. So we could probably borrow from those places as a point of reference. If, for instance, we are struggling to formulate that language for ourselves. But my sense is that I think we are capable of formulating that language. We can put it down and say, this is how indigeneity looks like in our practice, and this is how sacredness looks like, this is how spirit looks like, and then the regulation goes up to this far.
Of course.
Makosa Makom.
So we've done the strategic process. I think we've gone there. I like that we've spoken about communication, which is a major bone of contention, and the council is actually addressed a lot of the questions that I actually had about that. Because you mentioned the language things, documents are being translated into the various languages.
Yes.
So that is addressed.
Yes.
There's the roadshows. The roadshows, this is the contact, where you're actually going to be able to have contact and be able to make your own submissions. That is great. And that you also, it doesn't need to just be contact. You say that you can do recordings and send. You can use your WhatsApp voice notes and send your submissions. It would just be now council making sure that on the public domain we know how to actually get there, how to get the information to you guys. In those, if it's a WhatsApp, how does it get to you? So WhatsApp lines, emails. This is where the registrar is going to be able to take submissions. So that is the things that maybe we would be sharing with us in the future, if not now, Marcos. And also putting in, because we understand that, and you actually have the understanding that it's not many, actually most healers that have the information that we actually need do not have the access to social media.
Technology, yes.
To technology, technology. Technology is a better word. And that is the gap that you are trying to, you have informed us that this is how you're going to be feeling it.
Cool. Precisely. You never see any other process of law that goes into community when there's a regulation, ever. We probably are the only council and the only sector that will be doing that. For that reason, we are dealing with a very peculiar citizenry, a healer of South Africa, who spends most of the time on the forest, who spends most of the time barefoot, who spends most of the time listening to the voices of reason, who probably does not even want to spend a lot of time in technology because of the silences that generate this healing work that we are producing, Makos. So we are very aware of that, and which is why we have to then reach out to the healer and say, we want to come to where you are. So because we understand that as much as many of us use this technology, Makosi, some of us will tell you, and it's true, that I know how to type, I've got beautiful gadgets, I've got an iPhone, but idlozilam, as soon as I touch those things change. It just breaks. It just can't find it. And we've seen this. It happened with me also when I'm in Petlen. Sometimes when my grandmother is here, for some reason my laptop doesn't work and so on, then I know that I have to listen. I have to tune away. Because it's a particular conversation. Our ancestors speak differently. When they do those things, they're calling you into a place of, centering and listening and focus. That is why there's something called iphehlo. You move away. Makosi, uyokobela, uhlale phansi kwamakhandlela. It's a particular type of a citizenry. And for that reason, we have insisted to the minister to say we need to go to communities and do the roadshows. You can't just expect a healer to say they will just send an email to the registrar and that is the end. We are not going to be able to do it in that way.
While we are talking, let us not speak about, because we're in conversation already, Marcos.
Yes.
Let's speak about bogus healers.
Yes. Let's
speak about the bogus healers. I'm listening to you speaking now and mentioning the challenges that while people live in different ways and in peculiar ways. You're speaking about peculiarity and the things that we're actually seeing now And this is one of the reasons that I was going to say one of the reasons that I'm happy for the regulation.
Of
But
course.
it is one of the issues that will be addressed. Whether it makes me happy or not, but it will be addressed by the regulation.
Of
That
course.
what we are seeing, the craft is open to abuse.
A lot, Makosi, which is why this process of regulation is important, because you know, people nowadays wake up and they are suddenly healers, bogus healers who are prescribing for people incorrect medicines, incorrect processes of spirit, umuntu athi uyathwasisa ugobela, and harm your spirit. When you exit that place, you are completely wounded as a spirit being, whereas a process yepehlo is meant to heal us. And it is for this reason. Remember, this act is about protecting the public as well, but protecting the healer too, to say that once we have this almost standardized process of ipehlo that we all understand, everyone will be subjected to that process, and anyone then that does not comply obviously falls off the register. Number one, you'll be deregistered. It's an offense as well. You could be imprisoned. I think it's important that we say that healers, it becomes a criminal offense to prescribe a medicine that will kill someone, mainly because you didn't go through a training with the Gobela work around how to treat herbs. How do you measure them? How do you make sure that they are clean? You know, those types of things.
So it becomes a criminal offense to practice when this act is passed, right? To practice if you're not registered, does it not?
Well, let me explain that part. The act was passed in 2007. There is an exemption in the last part of the act. I don't know if you have it in front of you. That one sentence before it says the name of the act, because it's an exemption that says it's called a transitional exemption.
Okay.
So it says that after this act has been promulgated, it's called a transactional exemption. Date is Section 51. There is no person that is subjected to legal action or to any penalty that is contemplated in this act for engaging in traditional health practice during the period of 1 year following the date of commencement of this act, without being registered to do so. We have had a conversation with the minister about this. Since 2007, there is no traditional healer that has been arrested in South Africa. But basically...
Because there's no traditional healer that has been registered.
Yes. Yet, we all are governed by this act since 2007. We are expected to have been registered. But because in law, it is not the problem of the healer that we are not being registered, it's the problem of the system. And the transitional clause applies up to now, until such time that a mechanism to register has taken place and healers are in the system. And then this act will be amended. So after registration, in terms of our priorities as council, Makos, is to then ensure that this act goes back to Parliament. We do the necessary amendments. First and foremost, to remove the word interim, because we now have a fully fledged council that is registered healers that can stand on its own, and to also perhaps remove the transitional clause and other amendments that we may feel as healers we want to amend in the act, amongst other priorities. But the biggest priority for us in this period is to have conversations amongst ourselves as healers, stakeholder engagements. It's the biggest part of it. But we also can't do stakeholder engagements if you don't have a register, if you don't have, human capital, abandu, people who are going to work, and policies and systems in place. Which takes me then to explaining why we took a year to come to healers, Makos. When we arrived, fellow healers, to office, we inherited a system that was almost dysfunctional, for lack of a better word. We needed to start from the onset to develop systems, to develop policies that would guide us first and foremost how to employ a registrar. We need to make sure that we have a functional registrar, and then we hire people. We have an organogram to say, do you have a secretary? Do you have an administrator? Do we even have emails, for people to contact us? Where do healers find us? When healers are looking for me as a chairperson now, do they write to Fikile Vilakazi or do they write to a registrar? It took us very long, Makosi, to do those things. We needed to get a handover from a previous council. That also took its own life. We also had to be inducted so that we understand that we are entering into a space of public governance. So we needed to understand that there are rules that govern public service and public governance. We needed to be trained in terms of what you call the King 4 requirements of public governance, our relationship with the minister, our relationship with parliament, and our relationship with the law. So before we even hit the road and create unnecessary offenses to the public, we needed to be trained to understand who we are and what we represent. So that has delayed us in that process. And of course, the changes between the registrars, as you know, we are working towards employing a registrar as council. We are working with an acting registrar at the moment, which has been appointed by the minister. So, and as council, we are not an operational body. We are a regulator. You need a registrar to implement and help us. The registrar is the secretariat of council in terms of the act. Okay. So we got delayed there in that process of making sure that we've got a functional secretariat. We are in a better place now, which is why we are ready to say, let us go and see healers, which is why we were able to. And we also needed to put committees in place because, again, the work of council happens in committees. We needed to make sure that people that are in committees understand their roles. They put terms of reference for their committees so that they know what policies they must put in place and so on. And all of that is in place now, Makosi, and I can say confidently that the committees that are in place are functional. We also needed to define how we communicate to the public, and then eventually we created a spokesperson, and now we have a communications policy through which that work happens so that we can periodically, communicate to the public through statements, but also through Izimbizo and other processes. It took very, very long, and we thought we would come in before elections to the community, but elections also delayed us. And government works differently. You have to work with a particular political head. The ministers have changed now. We had to work with the new minister, but luckily, before elections, we made sure that we meet with the minister, at least to sign off on this process, YAMA regulations, so that we don't get delayed by the transition process.
And we're blessed to actually have the former minister be the
he's
deputy
back.
minister.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was relieved.
Yes, he's back in power. So the transition process for us is smoother than if it was a new minister that you have to then start inducting. That would have delayed us another year because that's how it works.
And what my worry, Makosi, is that is why maybe it could be one of the reasons why also the work didn't happen with the former interim council as well, is the period, because like you've spent a year and a half just doing the background work, and your term is 3 years.
Yes,
with an additional 2 years, so a lot of work needs to happen within this time. We have a very tight time frame to actually do a lot of work, and the background work is actually the most important.
You need to put systems in place in any organization. You can't function without paperwork. You can't function without people and hands. Without money also. So we needed to also sort out our relationship with money and treasury. So those things, Makos, and we also needed to sort our own relationships as council. We are new people. Imagine. We've just been thrown into this work. We don't know each other. As ways of working. There are no guidelines. Everybody says whatever they like. So we needed to also hold the relationships amongst ourselves to say by the time we go to the public, we need to have a sense of who we are amongst ourselves, understand each other's ways of working, and protocols in place to say how we work together. We all know the politics of traditional healing. We have had to deal with that amongst ourselves first. And I'm glad that we did that, because now we're sort of in a different place. We understand each other. We can see each other's strengths and balance each other's weaknesses. and we know everybody knows what is their role. Everybody is sort of.
Strategy in place.
We've got a strategy in place. We needed to put a strategy in place. We didn't have a strategy. And why the previous council didn't work, Makoso, the registrar, is also because there was no council. I don't know if healers are aware that the registrar stayed for about 2 years with no council. The registrar can't function without a council because he implements the strategy of council. So you had a registrar in office that had no work to do, because council has to give the registrar work to do. And the previous council, I think, resigned or was disbanded. As we all know, for about 2 years there was a vacuum. And when we came in 2023, then we had to close that vacuum. So we had to trace the former chairperson passed away. So we had to deal with those things. How do we find the history of this organization? We need documents. We need to know whether we start afresh or we build from what was done. So all of that took time, just the organizational development process. And then we had to build organizational culture as well, which is those ways of working, and so that we don't go out there being scattered and falling all over the place, but we actually really are going into the public from the place of leadership.
Of course. It actually seems that we actually have a very capable council, interim council at this point. And for us as healers to actually get to this point, and wanting to get to the next point, singakabongi, singasho ukuthi umsebenzi wenu silibala kukhala, silibala kuwona, ngeke sihlale singakhali makhosi, nidasiva nje masikhala ngoba at least sesinalo likhala lapha sokhalela khona. That's to begin with. So angisho nje ngicale lapho ukuthi siyabonga, sidawukhala, nidasiva, siyathi ukuthi sizabe sikhalela kuphi. Kunemehluko in having, and that keeps coming up a question. What is this compared to the traditional healers or health practitioners organizations? That's the one thing I've been having to explain over and over. This is the difference. So this is the opportunity for you to actually please explain Makosi, because it keeps coming up.
So just to answer the question, there are many healer organizations that have emerged in the last 10 to 15 years in the sector, out of frustration, I suppose, that there's this whole thing about the certificate. There is this thing about the certificate that we need to talk about. I don't know what it is, but healers feel like if you don't have a certificate from Mbandanyako, you are not the best. And that what that has done in Ndlondlo, people have fallen into a trap of bogus schools, but also emerging schools who may not necessarily be bogus, because they can give you a certificate, to be a doctor or to be a professor and all of that. So we're seeing all of that is emerging. And people have been asking a question: if I have a certificate, is this a recognized certificate by the Department of Health? If I have a certificate from the SADC, University of African Medicine, is this a valid certificate? If I have a certificate from Mbande, Yagwamajoy, is this recognized? It is not, Makosi. None of us are registered with council at this point. People issue their own certificates because they wish to do a process of recognition, and anyone has a right to do that. Because impande, a school and a pehlo, ugobela wako can say, Mdanam, I want to give you the certificate, ukumbule la uphuma khona ekhaya uyifake endombeni yakho. That is allowed. But that certificate does not legitimize you as a registered traditional healer. You would still need to go through this process. None of us, including myself, as Ukoko Solomon Shabangu, is registered in South Africa. Makosa Makulu. We are all living in a process of transitional exemption until such time that we all agree to say this is how we want to register each other, which is what this resolution process is about. So that is the difference. Only the
Because where your certificate will help you as part of the criteria to register. That is what your certificate from Mpandeni yakho or from kulenye indzawo would be able to assist.
Thokoza mkhulu. So the requirement, for instance, once you start registering, you will be required to produce your ID, a letter from ukobela wako, or some kind of documentation that is signed by your kobela to say this umntwana lo uthasela ekhaya. So whether that comes in a formal certificate from imbande yakho noma a letter, it's something that will be taken into consideration. Of course, your ABET level 1 proof, just your ability to read and write type of proof. Those are the 3 requirements, Makos. So that certificate, if they can write a letter for you and utwasegu leyo mpande, is probably going to be seen as some kind of proof. As long as it's got your Kobela certificate, it must have, a signature. And of course, some contact number to say this is how we can contact Kobela to confirm that this is a graduate of Ipehlo Lawamkulu Osmanjalo.
Nikulumile Makosi, I saw that you make there is a contention there that is made for people that if you find that you are not in good terms with your Kobela, that there's other ways to actually be to be vetted.
That's right.
As the communities.
So for instance, the first set of registrations, the exemption that I spoke about for people abasebetwasile, the verification process is the community. We know each other ebunyangeni. So it's not just ukobela wako. Many of us will say ukobela wam passed away. I don't have a relationship with my kobela anymore because wangiphatha kabi. We know those dynamics. The community, abantwana basekhaya edlozini, your sisters edlozini, they can verify to say besilidla na ibhodlo usibanibani, besigaya na imithi lapha empandeni. So we know this person. So those are all the verification processes. And then other healers will say, but siyamazi bekeze emgidini makasephehlweni. Those things count. So we will look at all that. That's why we're saying it's your kobela, it's community, it's your fellow colleagues, and so on. Your family also. Family is very key. Family knows because family participates in rituals. It's a very unique system of education. You never see parents getting to university processes and decision making, but here, when you perform rituals, your family gets involved and they know all these stages, so they will verify to say, yes, we know Kobela wake passed away 10 years ago, but this is the proof that umntwana bekasimhamsile thina ephehlweni. So those are all the verification processes that we're going to do. Just to quickly then talk about who is the council, Bandabadala. I am the chairperson, Ukwaku Solomon Nsizwa Kashabangu. We've got the vice chairperson. I'm not allowed to mention people's names, so I'm not necessarily going to mention their name, them by name. But
they are available in the public domain.
But yes, in fact, they are. They have been shared on the public domain. You've got. I'm happy to read them. Yeah. No, I'm going to mention them quickly. So, Vice Chairperson Mr. Kenneth Mohueng, who is also a representative of the Northwest. And then we've got provincial representatives. We've got Dr. Yvette Abrahams, who is based in the Western Cape, who's also in the category of a herbalist. We have Unkosi Ulukolom Khojana, who is also in the Western Cape, who is representing the Western Cape. We have got Ugogo Ugaloway. She is in the Eastern Cape as well, representing the Eastern Cape. We've got Chief Ramabulana, who is representing Limpopo as well. We've got Ugogo Uletis Kosana, who is representing Gauteng. And we've got Upeni, Umkhulu Upeni, who is representing the Northern Cape. And then we've got Ugogo Usarapula, who is representing Mpumalanga. And then we've got Ugogo Usiase Ntswaki, who is representing Free State, Bandabatala. And then you also have one person from the Department of Health who is working in the, I think is the Deputy Director General, if it's not the DG, Mr. Murewani. And then we've got one a lawyer, a person vested in law. It is attorney Mongezi Ndanga. We don't have a medical practitioner. The medical practitioner withdrew at the beginning of the appointment process, but the minister is working to replace that position. We've got a pharmacist who is Honorable Shivambo Mavis, and we've got 3 representatives of the community, Dr. Malachi, we've got Dr. Nechiyombo, and we've got also Mr. Maleka, who is the traditional surgeon. Then it's got Subenokoko Ungiti from KwaZulu-Natal, who is also a birth attendant. And then we've got Umkulu Ukumete, who represents KwaZulu-Natal. And then we've got Honorable Commissioner Oshila Mbele, who is the spokesperson of council. Yeah, she has been appointed as a spokesperson. So those are the members of council as we speak, Bandabatala, that were appointed through the process that I outlined earlier on. I'm hoping that I have covered the questions that have been asked, isn't long? And we are looking forward to the submissions. We are looking forward to engaging with the sector. Bandabatala, I want to really encourage us. Let us really maximize this moment. Let us speak to each other. Let us make sure that we make it to be what we want it to be. Lastly, there is a provision in the Act, Section 50, subsection 4, that talks about exemption from payment of fees. We are aware that there are high levels of poverty in the country. There will be those circumstances where someone would say, I may not be able to pay these fees in these ways. Section 50, subsection 4 makes a provision for a healer to write to council and say that these are my circumstances, but I am committed to be compliant. Those things can be looked at in terms of the Act, but we are encouraging all of us because as we all enter into the register, then we are able to be quickly independent as council and then really be our indigenous selves in the manner that we'd like to be. Makos. Ndao.
Another question that came up was, what does my registration buy me?
So we are bound by the National Health Act. So it means once we register, all the benefits that accrue from the National Act accrue to us as well. We are bound by the Medicine and Drugs Act. So all the benefits that accrue from prescription of drugs and so on would ordinarily accrue to us as well. So that's how, we are bound by the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Act, which basically recognizes the fact that once you are registered with a particular body of your registration, you can then commercialize your medicines. You can put your medicines on the shelves. Because that body would have accredited you to say, we know you're a healer. So you can now not just stop from prescribing African potato to Amatwasana and to your patients, but you can process it for the market. If opioid uglap, I'm making an example, you can also, you are now also recognized by the SAPRA process, which is the South African Health Products Regulation Authority, which regulates products development. So it means then you can easily, after registration, go to SAPRA and say, here is my product, I am a healer, I would want to have my products being sold in the market, or I want to open my own pharmacy. As a healer, because I'm a herbalist. Those things. Currently, SAPRA is working to create a category, Bandabatala, for recognition of African traditional medicines, which is a category that we don't have at the moment. But it's difficult for those systems to be put in place if we are not in the system yet. Okay. So those are all the benefits that would accrue with being registered. All the laws that govern, for instance, agriculture, manages hemp, which is Inzango,
because the cannabis.
The cannabis, yeah. Yes, cannabis. So automatically those benefits accrue to us. You are able to get, to go to agriculture and say, I am cultivating in Zango, yes, can I please have a license? And you can be given that license. So there are many benefits that accrue in terms of the Department of Land and Rural Development, Department of Agriculture, Science, Innovation and Technology, Department of Health, all those. So you don't just benefit from health, but by virtue of being in a register, it also gives us an opportunity to be part of the public health system. Because once you are registered, you have a practice number. That practice number gets linked to the public service system. And then it means then that over time, you are able to argue for the inclusion of traditional health into the public health system, where we can see traditional healers working alongside nurses and doctors and pharmacists and physiotherapists and so on. So here we are really developing a system of coexistence, so that we can be functional within the public health system and promote referral pathways. You could write a referral letter from here, a patient to say you can go to nurse and so. The nurse can do the same and refer to say, I think le situation idinga omkhulu usimenjalo is not necessarily a physiological problem, but this is a spiritual problem. Go to inyanga usoro and so. So those are the opportunities that would accrue. That is not possible to do at the moment because we need to develop a system of trust between the different councils. And it is through that registration, because once we accredit, we actually say we are giving confidence to the public, to other councils who are providing health in the system, to say, you can trust us because, our system is now accredited. We do verify, we do test. We are aware that healers are producing herbs, and these herbs have a particular standardization. Before they are processed, they have to pass this test and so on and so on. And when I'm saying test, I'm not taking examination necessarily, but I'm saying a particular verification process, because that would all agree upon. Dosages and measurements, you get all those things. The most important, our curriculum can also be accredited by SAQA, which is the South African Qualifications Authority. One of the committees is working on that. So when we register schools, Abokobela, you're going to submit your curriculum, and our system is going to be linked to the South African Qualifications Authority. So once we accredit you, it also means then that you are being recognized by the Department of either basic education or higher education and so on. So the qualifications that you issue here will be qualifications that are going to be recognized by the Department of Education. So those are all the benefits. It's no longer just a bogus certificate sitting there in Ndumba, but you could use that certificate, for instance, to upgrade yourself, to migrate towards a diploma or a degree in indigenous knowledge systems, or a PG DIP if you want to further your studies outside of Ipetlo, because that would be recognized as your prior learning, to say this person has a basic certificate in African cosmology or in African spirituality, whichever name that we give it. And you can then enter, University of KwaZulu-Natal has got a PG DIP in indigenous knowledge systems, UWC has it, or you could also go to Credo Mutwa School of African Cosmology, and further your studies, type of a thing. So those are all the benefits. And you could also be a specialist in your area, like for instance in the context of people who are pure a midwifery, to be a birth attendant. You could specialize in that. To say, I'm an indigenous midwife. You could open your own practice over time for people to come bezo data endumbeni yakho, because you have been given that work. It's a specialization. Some of us will grow to specialize in cancer, because once you standardize your herbs, you are now able to patent them as well, to say this is the herb engalpiwa umkhulu usimenjalo, and I've been treating these wounds zoshukela ngazo over time. There's case of patients who've healed. You can patent that. You can get royalties in terms of the intellectual property laws of the country that recognize patenting rights, ownership of intellectual property, and so on. oluphiwe idlozi lakho, because it's the intellectual property of umkhulu wakho nogogo wakho nedlozi lakho nabantu abadala. So those are all, Makosi, the benefits that would accrue with the process of registration, which at this point is difficult to access because we are not in the system. But it doesn't mean that we are integrating. I think it's important to say that. We are not saying that we want to be absorbed by the system, because that's the greatest fear. The process of registration so far that we have been arguing for with the ministry is that of coexistence. Asivali izindumba zethu, we are practicing indumbeni zethu. You're not forced to go now and be in a hospital. But Indumba is recognized as an indigenous hospital, as an indigenous clinic, and so on. If you want to collaborate, of course, with a medical doctor, you can. But it's not necessarily now saying we are being westernized. I think it's very key to emphasize that. We are just really affirming the system that we are using, and we are just putting it in a document to say this is it.
I love the word affirming.
Of course.
Of course. You actually, and it can only be done by traditional healers.
No one else.
I understand, because the challenges that we experience in J sisodwana phansi singakhona ukuvana ngale metalena is a big one.
And that's the big challenge. The Department of Health, they're saying this sector is difficult. We've been trying for so many years. This sector is stubborn. It's because we know our sector. And let this be in the hands of traditional healers. Let us write it ourselves. We know how to fight with each other and find each other again. Let us do it.
Of course.
Makosa Makulu, this is the time and this is the moment that we have been waiting for.
Thank you, Ketla, for the work. That's what I want to say. Thank you, Ketla. Sibonge Likomi, Sibonge iCouncil, Sibonge nje ukusivulela. Ngiyasho ngithi indzawo ekhala siyayidinga. Siyabonga kakhulu. Do you have any questions? From the things that you have heard, a lot of it is new, and a lot of it does not mean anything because you are not inside. But when you start practicing, if you've been practicing, you'll understand how the challenges of being outside of the system, because there are many challenges of being outside of the system, and this is what this is actually going to address. Yes, like you said, we do not want integration, but being outside of the system presents many, many challenges in the ways that we do.
Question, with regards to especially with the agriculture, would it now enable us to be able to use, for example, for the cleansings that we need to do, being able to do it in what we now deem as public rivers and public oceans that we are currently having a problem utilizing because of the misunderstandings in the community?
It does mean that, Gogo, of course, with a system of agreement amongst ourselves as different councils, and our relationship with nature. So obviously, there are regulations around oceans and rivers and mountains and forests, but also there are regulations in terms of indigeneity. So once we are understood and we've put it in paper to say this is how it works, and there's a sense of agreement and understanding, it also opens up those pathways to say we can no longer, for instance, be arrested by police because they find you upahla on the mountains or on the ocean, like it happened during COVID-19 where people were not allowed to go to the oceans by upahla. So it opens those pathways because there's going to be a general understanding to say this is a ritual process, this is an indigenous process. But of course there will be, standards of saying how do you keep nature clean, how do you keep nature sacred. Even as we pasha in ways that our generation that comes after us need to be able to find nature still intact and maybe even in a better place. So it's those kinds of things to say if you burn a makandlela, in the forest, you just turn your back and go, and then the forest burns down, the type of thing, that we put mechanisms to say this is how you manage your forest, and you leave the place in such a way that someone else who comes after you will be able to utilize it in those ways without necessarily saying, no, you can't go there because it's not acceptable. So it opens up those pathways, Makos, in that way.
And you also now have a body and you're not fighting
alone.
The white men on your own at the river. That each time you go to the river, you know that you're going to be accosted by this white man. So now you have a whole body fighting with you and for you, representing you, which is actually what these kind of professional bodies provide. You will see, I'll go about doctor about rites abantu, but we are vulnerable because we stand on our own.
Yeah.
Gogo, you have a question?
No.
Oh,
I also want to say, Makosi, healers need to know that in council meetings, healers can participate as observers. If healers want to be observers, you just need to write a letter to the chairperson, and we can then enable that process to happen. So that's one of the things. We are a transparent organization that strives to say, this is not our council, this is a council of traditional healers. And the work that council does is as transparent as that. Of course, the issues of costs and how you get yourself to the meeting becomes then your own costs. But we're not going to buy healers who say, I would like to come to one of your meetings. Can I please be allowed to just come and sit and observe? Makos.
I've been sharing that.
Yeah.
I've been sharing that. Makos.